So how long were you south of the border?
Well, about a week, and we'll be here for about a week. And it just happens also, my former assistant, Karin Kasama, has a new movie that's opening tonight at midnight. So,
plug it.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
It's called The Invitation.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've received it.
And I don't think it has a distributor yet, so one of the things I'm hoping is they get some, some sharks circling them.
Friendly sharks with dull teeth. It seems that's another byproduct of a festival like this that's grown so large and becomes so, well, I don't want to say corporatized, but let's face it, it's part of what's going on. And with the kinds of sponsorships and partnerships that they're doing.
It's not literally a market, so it's not like the Cannes Film Festival. But
but a lot of deals are being made here.
Deals do get made.
But many have already been kind of predetermined. Like
some of them haven't, some of them haven't.
Yeah.
Truly, North America doesn't have a great market festival. I mean, Toronto is the big market festival
for
now,
North America,
and then Sundance is really for first and second time filmmakers, for new filmmakers. So there's a lot of people around who aren't new. And so if you have a new movie and you don't have a distributor, there's a limited number of places you can take it to get seen with an audience. And I think most movies really play a lot better in front of an audience, instead of just somebody's video or computer where you can be taking phone calls while you're looking at it, and
right. A lot of the hand shaking and that is equally part of like a festival like Sundance or this one, where I mean that's a lot of the merit you'll get from that is face to face with distributors or other.
Yeah, and with the audience.
Yeah, and the audiences.
I don't think it's the situation that it was in the 80s and 90s where you could get bidding wars going, and there were only so many independent filmmakers and there were only so many distributors, and so they knew, well, we better make a bid right away, and maybe we'll make a preemptive bid. That doesn't happen anymore. If we could see it a day before Miramax sees it, maybe we'll have a chance of getting it before they can outprice us or something. That kind of industry for independent movies just doesn't exist anymore.
Let me officially start.
Okay.
This is very typical, by the way, for my podcast. The starting in mid thought, mid conversation. So, but I want to let everyone know that I'm sitting with John Sayles. And I have to sometimes think, without being a fawning type of person, but to sometimes remind myself, when I was starting to really get interested in film on a different level, and going through the history, but in terms of latter day, in what we call now the Independent Film Festival, which came from exactly what we were just talking about, the birth of Sundance, the Miramax in that age of time. But you were easily 15 years already making independent films in the United States, 15, 20 years before that. Going back to the late 70s.
Yeah, basically the first movie that we made, Return of the Secaucus 7, we shot in 1978. I was writing for Roger Corman at the same time, so I think Piranha shot in 77 or 78. And I remember going to the Park City Film Festival, like 2 years before it became the Sundance Film Festival.
Oh, I thought it was like the USA.
It was called that, but it was in Park City, and it moved from Denver, and then they took the same movies up to Park City. And
and casually, it was probably just called that Park City Festival.
Yeah, it was run by the people who ran Telluride, actually.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Same part of the country, right? And interesting, you started as writing for as you said, for Corman, Roger Corman, right? And your first project was Piranha.
The first one that I wrote was Piranha. Yeah,
Piranha. And it's interesting to see the graphic again, because I went on to your website /blog, which is, by the way, really good.
Oh, good. Thanks. Yeah.
I mean, it's really good information.
I don't go on it, so
I get
I'm
it.
glad to hear.
I figure that someone like Andrew or
we've had various people work on it over the years.
Yeah, it's good because it's all the information is there. It's well organized, and it's like one-stop shopping in a way. Like, it's really helpful. It was helpful to kind of review some of that information again. And I was just looking at the poster and knowing, of course, Roger Corman's approach. It was like there was not even shamefully trying to in any way disguise the fact that it was just
a Jaws
rehashing
spin-off.
Jaws. So my question actually that I wrote down was, it must have been frustrating for you guys when Jaws came out and sabotaged the premiere of Piranha.
Yeah. No, as Steven Spielberg always says, because he hired Joe Dante to do Gremlins and a couple other things. Yeah. He said, well, Piranha was a Jaws ripoff, but it was the best Jaws ripoff.
Right. They were right. Or I think there was a whale or killer whale one. Orca. Right. You remember.
Yes. And Joe, after he made Piranha, got offered Orca 3, and
they didn't even bother making Orca 2.
No, they made Orca 2, but, and then they were going to make a comedy version of Jaws called Jaws 3 People Nothing, but they never did.
That's funny. Oh, how did you meet Roger Corman?
I had just come out to the West Coast to try to write screenplays. I had written a novel, got it published. When it was time to write my second novel, I was directing and acting in a summer stock theater company in New Hampshire, and I couldn't sell my own book, so I needed to get a literary agent.
Right.
His agency had a deal with a film agency, so automatically my second novel was being represented by an agency in Hollywood, and a little light went on in my head. Oh, I could get their phone number, so if I go out there, I'll have at least one phone number. And so I talked them on the phone. They said, oh, yeah, well, we're representing your book as a property. And I said, well, it probably wouldn't make a very good movie. It's a good novel, but it's not necessarily going to adapt into a movie. But I'm interested in writing screenplays. And they said, what would you send us a sample? And so I adapted Elliot Azanoff's 8 Men Out, which was I got to make as a movie 11 years later. It turned out that the head of the agency, Everett Ziegler, had been Elliot Azanoff's literary agent 25 years earlier when that book came out. Mm-hmm. So he knew the property very well. He said, you did a great job. You'll never get to make this thing as a movie. There's a curse on it. And but come out here and we might do something for you. We moved to Santa Barbara in, I think, 1977. And very early on, what happened is Frances Dole, who used to be Roger Corman's kind of main assistant, script supervisor, she did everything there. She had read some of my stories and gave my short story collection to Roger, and he read it on a plane, or read some of it on a plane, and said, yeah, this looks like a guy we should work with. And they had a rewrite of Piranha available at the time.
Yeah, he had a talent for spotting talent. I mean, as well as his whole other, he obviously created an entire way of making inexpensive films at a
producing
at a
and
profit.
directing, and
so that was clearly his best talent, one of his other talents. But figuring out that equation. But then he also had an eye for just incredible talent, right? So that's why.
And I think an eye to here's because he hired several people, Max Apple and a couple other people, Rose Ellen Brown, who'd written novels. He said, here's somebody who's they've already got a lot of experience that I didn't have to pay for.
Yeah,
and they're entry level, so I can pay them scale. And they'll get their feet wet, starting out in the movie business, and I can get somebody who has more experience than the usual newcomer for scale. So it was a good business deal as well as he often, like Joe Dante and Alan Arkush and some of the other people who worked there, started as editors for him. And they would cut trailers, and then they would cut features, and then he figured, well, if I make them into a director, at least they'll know what footage they want to go into the editing room with.
You never did that.
No,
so
I didn't go to film school. I didn't go through that way. I always figured, well, there's this other route, which is there are directors who wrote their way into a directing career. John Huston being my favorite, I think. And, there were people who made one movie, but there's other people who, they stayed around as directors after, Francis Coppola, started as screenwriters.
Yeah, he did okay.
And eventually they say, oh, I want to direct this one. And if they've had some success as a screenwriter, maybe they get that chance.
Right. Yeah, we're going to try to come full circle later and just sort of say, well, all those other guys, or, I'm exaggerating or generalizing to some degree, but most of those other guys that were working for Roger Corman, ended up in Hollywood in one way or another, or they kept going back. And and even though, of course, you worked within the system to some degree, you had at least one foot always sort of in independent film.
I'm one of the few people who've gotten away with doing that. I think there are other people who would like to have gotten away with that. I continue to be a screenwriter for hire. That's how I make my living. Sometimes it's features, more and more it's television now, because that's kind of where the heat is for good stuff getting made. And I'm nobody calls me and says, we want you to direct something and here's the money and go do it. They call me and say, we want you to write something, and then we're going to look for a director.
But I'm getting at that you could have gone that route. I don't know how it would have turned out for you, but had you just said, you know what, I'm going to go by, like Joe Dante, even though you may not even had as an illustrious or as a bigger career as you have had.
He stayed in the system.
But he stayed in the system.
Yeah, Sam Raimi, who I've worked with, have stayed in this system.
Right. Whereas I'm saying you consciously, it appears, stepped out of that, or would kind of occasionally go through back and forth, oscillating maybe some degree. I don't know.
It was just clear that the stuff I wanted to make, because, you make a movie, it's a year of your life, at least.
Yeah.
Was not stuff that they were, even if you gave it to them for free, finished, they would know what to do with.
Right.
It was just not what they were doing. And so I kind of fairly early on figured every once in a blue moon, there's going to be something they're interested in financing or distributing that I want to do. And so I'll run it and buy them, in the script form. And then they'll say yes or no. But a lot of them just don't even bother.
Right.
This is just not what they do.
Right. Yeah. So you had the foresight to say, I think something like, actually, this might have more commercial potential.
Yeah.
Let's say
8 Men Out.
8 Men Out, even though I was going to say that right away, because then you sort of said it had this curse on it. So maybe there was some already.
As I said, it took 11 years.
Yeah.
And Orion, who eventually made it, had already turned it down twice. The same people. It was, sometimes you go back to a studio because the heads are new. They'd been the same people from the beginning.
Right.
And finally they made it, I think, because there were a bunch of young actors who they wanted to work with, who we wanted to work with. They were on our list and their list. And because the producers, Sarah Pillsbury and Midge Sanford, who when we first were taking it around didn't have any feature credits, when we went back to Orion, they had just produced Desperately Seeking Susan for Orion, and it had made a lot of money. And that helped as well, is the producers now had a track record with that exact studio. And so they figured, okay. And they gave us some, fairly strict, okay, this movie's going to cost this and nothing more, and it's going to be 2 hours or less.
That's not outside of your... Both of those things. First of all, you've always been economical, out of necessity, if not out of just a sense of responsibility, right? To your financiers and budget and all that, right?
And with the 2 hours, basically, I just said to everybody, except for Joe Jackson, the illiterate Southern guy, everybody talk really fast. And I literally showed them a Jimmy Cagney movie called City for Conquest. That's, it's about 78 minutes long or something like that, and everything happens in it, and everybody talks really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm going to cut it really fast because it's the Roaring '20s. The rhythm of the movie. One of the interests, I also made Matewan, which is set in a year later, but it's in West Virginia.
Yes.
It's not, the Roaring '20s have not reached West Virginia yet. And the rhythms of the two movies couldn't be more different, just because you're in a different part of the world and the people have a different rhythm.
I was thinking also you might have gotten greenlit because The Brother from Another Planet had some heat to it too, didn't it? I mean, didn't it
do helped,
okay
not
at
really.
the time?
It really didn't help that much. It just, I think studios look at those films and say, oh, geez, that made... $500,000 profit. We throw away $500,000 on a movie sometimes because, well, that's the price of admission to get to a certain actor. We're not impressed with $500,000 profit.
Right.
But, the fact that I had continued to make movies and stuff like that, so I was still kind of almost in the conversation. As I always say, is, after my first movie, Return of the Secaucus 7, kind of got on screens and got some attention. I was catapulted from total obscurity to relative obscurity.
Yeah.
I kind of stayed in that, gray area ever since.
Yeah. I was going to tell you that I saw, when I was living in Boston in the early to mid 80s, I saw The Return of the Secaucus Seven and Liana as a double feature.
Oh, really?
In a repertory. And so when people would ask me why I was living in Boston, I said, well, I attend Harvard Square Theater.
Yeah.
So, because I spent a lot of afternoons and seeing those double bills.
Yeah.
And that was
I lived in East Boston for a while, and in the late 70s. And when I was looking for a job at first, I would look for a job until about 11 o'clock. And in those days, between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock was something called dime time, where the subway system was only a dime.
Oh, really?
If you went in those hours, because it wasn't rush hour.
Yeah.
And so I would spend my dime and go to the Harvard Square, or, or 3 or 4 of those great theaters. The Boylston, there was one, and the Kendall Square.
Sure.
And kind of catch up, because I hadn't seen that many foreign movies or art movies at that point.
Yeah.
And that would be my reward for looking for work all morning.
Was the Nickelodeon there when you were
No,
there?
the Nickelodeon
was really
was there.
new.
The Orson Welles was there over in Cambridge,
and
the Brattle. Yeah. So I had a regular circuit of those things. And it was great because they were showing good movies.
Right.
And the admission during the day wasn't that much, and it only cost me time to get from East Boston to the theaters.
Well, I think I had seen probably Baby It's You on VHS at home, and then when I lived in Boston, I went and I saw, as I said, Secaucus 7 and Liana as a double feature. So I guess earlier when you were saying that the films you wanted to make were not going to be ones that the studios were going to want to make, and making emotionally intimate films, which is like, let's say, definitely at least the first part of your career, were definitely intensely impersonal films, with those we just mentioned, including Baby It's You. And is that kind of what you were referring to? I mean, I'm sort of telling you that's what you meant. But,
well, yeah, it really, it's not even emotional intimacy or what they're about or whatever.
No?
They're just not Hollywood movies. They're not made to attract the lowest common denominator. They're not made to always have people come out of the theater singing the theme song and shouting, "We're number one." They're movies that there's a lot of back and forth in them, and they're not heroic.
Right.
There may be people you like and that you kind of identify with them, but they don't always act the way you want them to.
But
so they're complex in a way that most Hollywood movies can't afford to be complex. And that's really what makes them harder to sell.
Yeah.
And even though some of them, if they had been sold by a studio, might have been successful movies, they were clearly difficult. And truly what a studio has to look for is what's just a slam dunk. Even if we don't make a very good movie out of it, people are going to want to see it because of the elements. Who's in it, what's it about.
Reaching the most people, as you said, reaching the most people and alienating the fewest people with the movie, right?
And what's going to, when somebody's a star, even if they don't realize it, their agent usually says this may not last forever. So maybe in the next 4 years, my actor is going to make 8 to 10 movies. I better pick those movies carefully, or they won't be a star anymore. So why would I, have my actor be in this little quirky thing that may barely get a release, even if it's a good part? And quite honestly, in the early 80s, there was a lot of tension between actors and their agents, because the actors would want to, there's a lead, I've never played this kind of thing before, and the agent would say, they're paying scale, this movie's, nobody's going to see this movie. That's like, 2 months out of your money-making life, that this is when you should be maximizing, you should be in the next Star Wars or whatever, and really, buy a couple houses and have a couple marriages, and do what, you're supposed to do if you're a movie star.
So who were you watching then when you were, as you say, you didn't go to film school, but regardless, I mean, you just work for Roger Corman, I guess, is going to film school and something, right? In terms of the business side of it, certainly, if not the technical side. I don't know if he shared your aesthetics, but were you growing up watching movies at home, and where did that start?
No, you didn't. I'm old enough. You did not watch movies at home.
Okay. I guess what I mean is
you watched TV, and they had movies on with commercials.
Sure, yes.
I didn't see a foreign movie with subtitles until I went to college, so I didn't have much of an art film background.
Mm-hmm.
I saw movies at the drive-in mostly, double and triple features.
Where was that?
Around Schenectady, New York, in a place called Burnt Hills, New York. And so I saw a lot of Elvis movies, a lot of westerns, some good, some not so good. Bud Bedecker, Anthony Mann.
Let me rephrase so I don't sound like a complete idiot.
Yeah.
Anthony Mann films?
Yeah. John Huston's movies.
Oh, right.
He made some good westerns. A bunch of people who were, John Sturgis, and I liked Hitchcock movies. If I was going to see a black and white movie, the Hitchcock ones were the ones that I liked the most sometimes. And then eventually he started working in color too. But very often, when I was a kid, the black and white movie was the boring one.
Right.
So you liked the cartoons and you liked the Western, and then there was the boring one that you kind of fell asleep during. And then, truly, I started, watching movies on TV. So I would have seen something like Two Women, Vittorio De Sica's movie with Sophia Loren, but I would have seen it dubbed. It's a musical comedy,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I would have seen it dubbed late at night with commercials. And I really liked it. And so it was great when I finally got to see it in Italian with subtitles.
In a movie like that one, which I remember very clearly, you're grateful for commercials because that's an intense movie.
It's an intense movie. By the time I got to see it without commercials, I could deal with it. But for a kid, it was just, and my father had been in the army in Italy, so I kind of had his stories about what post-war Italy was like, and so I had some kind of reference for what that was, but it was dubbed. I didn't know what Sophia Loren really sounded like until I was in college. Then when I went to college, I caught up as quickly as I could. The college I went to didn't even have a drama department, much less a film department. But there was one English professor, and I was a psychology major. I didn't even take English classes. I think I took one English class my whole college career. But there was one guy who he's kind of like a Henry James scholar who taught a winter study course for 1 month, and I got to take a course on Ingmar Bergman. And right when he was kind of hitting his stride and making, he'd made probably a half dozen really good, interesting movies at that point. We saw every movie he had made up till 1970.
Seventh Seal.
But even some of the early ones where he didn't know what he was doing yet. He was their great theater director.
Right.
And so he kept getting a chance even when the first movies weren't very good. And then you really saw, he's figured this thing out. And then he made a couple color movies that didn't look very good, and then they figured color out. So it was an interesting thing to see the progression of one voice in film, but also there were other movies that were foreign movies and, not really American independent movies yet, because that wasn't a movement yet. But every once in a while there would be something like David and Lisa was an early one, or Marty was an independent movie. That would be kind of more interesting. John Cassavetes had just started his stuff at that point.
Right. Where did you go to college? Where was that?
Williams College in Massachusetts.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you really were around the Northeast. You grew up in
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly in Schenectady, which is a big industrial town, or was a big industrial town until the General Electric Company pretty much left.
What does a place beyond the pines?
Yeah,
that's what Schenectady means, right?
Yeah. That was based on an incident that happened there.
Right. A friend of mine made that movie.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
Yeah, to see in France. Did you see that Place Beyond the Pines?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
I'm about officially 5 years behind.
You're almost there then.
Yeah.
No, it's been about.
I'm just about there.
Yeah.
I'm in the academy, so I get to vote on.
Right.
But and I very often don't vote because I just say I haven't seen enough of these movies to have an opinion on them, and I just say, look, I'm gonna recuse myself this year.
Yeah. Well, that's responsible.
So I've got these piles of videos, but between trying to make my own movies, writing for other people. I just don't have time to see movies the way I used to.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. I can understand that.
And I see some of the contemporary. I like to go to the movie theater, buy popcorn, and see a movie. So if I miss something the first time around, it takes a while to catch up with it.
Yeah.
But if it's something I think is good, I do catch up.
Yeah. So what's like, just since we're talking about it, do you remember a recent... you can take your time.
What did I just...
I have editing
I just saw
here.
something again that... I hadn't. Oh, I just saw The Big Lebowski again, and I had seen it when it came out.
Oh,
I know the Coen Brothers, but I felt like, gee, I should look at that again. You know,
it has the staying power because there's so many nuances in those films.
That one was just fun, you know, and I know a lot of the actors and stuff like that, so it was just fun to see their work. And
there's so many wonderful moments in that. It's crazy. Around the time, I guess, of Brother from Another Planet and coming out of that, the reason I thought maybe that was a bigger success, I didn't really know this, because you did start to make larger ensemble types of films with Eight Men Out and Matewan.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases we were able to get other people's money, OPM as they used to say, and that meant that we could make a bigger movie. You know, I had been kind of self-financing or just, you know, the 1982 version of crowdfunding, which was going around and asking everybody on the street, you know, and you know, you could put as little as $500 into the movie and be, you know, one of the producers of it. But when, you know, Baby It's You was Paramount. 8 Men Out was Orion, so there occasionally it was a studio. Then there was also this phenomenon of video was showing up, and so there was a guy named Larry Estes whose first, when he got a job, the first movie he picked was Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. So all of a sudden he was golden, and he made maybe, you know, 25, 30 movies in a couple years. Where they would, his company would own the VHS rights, the video rights, and then they would make it for $3 million or under usually, and then they would go look for a distributor, a theatrical distributor. So we made a couple movies that way.
Right.
So there really was a period, I'd say the 80s and 90s mostly, where there was an independent movie business. Which doesn't exist anymore and didn't really exist before.
Yeah. Did Larry SDC... Was he just someone who saw where everything was going? Was he kind of visionary in that way? Because, I mean, there was a period of time, I recall, where straight to video, that expression, that market or whatever, was a stigma. Like, those were B-movies.
That's why he wanted them to have a theatrical run as well.
I see. So that's what I was getting at.
He didn't want them to be straight to video. He was making what were kind of good, serious, you know, movies.
But he saw that still was where the money was, and that maybe there just had to be a change of perception. But it was visionary, because certainly the theatrical is now blatantly sort of, for the majority of independent filmmakers anyway.
It's a loss leader.
Yeah,
it's the advertising for the other
It's a
things.
film review, and it's maybe being, you know, you meet
some publicity. Yeah.
It's publicity. Yeah. You can grow the publicity and the right, and also you are qualified perhaps for an award
for the independent, you know, the so-called independent movies. They have budgets higher than what I do that have big stars who are at the moment big stars in them. You get to have that premiere where they take the pictures and they show up in all the magazines. You don't do that when it goes on video on demand. Yeah. You know, you don't get them in a room and pretend that we're going to come into the, you know, the lobby of some place where they're going to stick a cassette into a machine. So yeah, I think one of the things that Larry and some of the other people at that time realized is, there's a whole new factor here, which is people are going to start watching movies at home as much or more than they go to movie theaters. And that's a revenue stream. That revenue stream has kind of, you know... more than flattened, it's dried up because there are other ways to get movies now where you don't even have that physical thing, and there's, you know, you can download them legally or unlegally or whatever. And you know, kind of what's happened for marginal filmmakers, which most independent filmmakers are, is that there's no revenue stream anymore. Right. You know, the movies may get seen, but mostly they're getting seen for free.
Not to get too far off topic, but I assume that now films are being made in order to get television or other things. I mean, because there's the writing is on the wall to some degree. Obviously, there's some degree of a industry and still in the non-studio segment, but it's very small.
If your goal is to have a career, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
If your goal is to make a good movie, and then maybe never get to make another one again, you should just make a good movie. Right. You know, and then maybe people will find a way to it.
I think people do think that way, at least until the first baby comes along.
Yeah, what I always say to young filmmakers is on your second movie, you either have to pay people or get new friends. Because there's an awful lot of, there's some very good movies made for almost nothing with everybody just pitching in.
Yeah.
It's just that if that movie then gets attention and the director gets famous or whatever, an actor gets famous, the next time around people say, well, we worked so hard and got so little sleep.
Right.
How about paying us?
Yeah. And the Kickstarter, the crowdfunding, I should say, opportunity is also, you can only go to that well once. I mean, you can go back over and over, but it's a diminishing returns because
the laws are going to change in that soon, and I imagine that's what's going to happen is people are going to be a little bit more like investors, so that if the movie does make profit, which doesn't happen that often, they would get their money back, and maybe some profit. But I think also there's kind of a fairly low ceiling on that. If you're really, really, really famous, you could probably raise $3-4 million.
Yeah.
If you're not, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars at the best. And there's a limit to what you even now with cheaper technology, what you can do with that if you're going to hire professionals, if you're going to hire professional actors, if you're going to hire professional crew. If you hire one Screen Actors Guild actor, you're paying Screen Actors Guild minimum for all of them. And so, a lot of
from
the movies,
all of the other actors, or
for
all the other
actors, even if they're not in the Screen Actors Guild, you pay them the minimum for their participation. You just don't pay the welfare and pension.
Oh, I see.
So there's a thing, you Taft-Hartley them, the Taft-Hartley bill. I think it was in 48 or something, and it was a bill that went through Congress that the main part of it was to make sure that we didn't have national strikes like they do in Europe, where the whole country shuts down. And so one of the things that it does is that it ghettoizes unions, even within the same industry. So the Writers Guild goes, their contract comes up months apart from the Directors Guild, and the Editors Guild is a different guild, and the craft guilds aren't even all under the IA. There's also the Teamsters and a couple of other little ones. So you're all separated, and you can't go on sympathy strike with each other. What came out of that thing with the Taft-Hartley thing as far as new actors, I won't call them non-actors is concerned, new actors is concerned, is if you go into a town and there's somebody who should be in your movie, but they don't know if they'll ever be in a movie again, you Taft-Hartley them. You pay them the minimum for their performance, but you don't pay their pension and welfare. If they ever make another movie, then they'll join the union.
I see.
So we've done quite a bit of that because a lot of our movies are location movies, and we'll go to West Virginia. And here's 15, 20 people who they've got the accent already. Yeah, and the movies have never come to them before, and they might actually have some talent or be able to play a certain part, and so you pay them the minimum, but you don't. You say, well, if you go out to Hollywood or if a movie ever comes again, you're going to have to join the union and pay your dues, but you'll also start to have a pension fund.
Wow, this dovetails nicely into the next sort of segment of the career in a way, which is making kind of socially more aware films of that theme.
Socially conscious.
Socially conscious.
As opposed to socially unconscious.
Right. I guess Matewan and maybe City of Hope.
City of Hope,
has
definitely,
that, and Matewan
and we've continued, Amigo recently.
Amigo,
is something that
was in the
history
Philippines.
People didn't know, in the Philippine-American War. Yeah. And those, why not a period
and even
movie?
Lone Star.
Yeah, a period movie is more expensive to make than a contemporary movie. You've got to change things. You've got to change buildings and costumes and things like that. Lighting is different, depending on the period that you're in. And then something with a scale like Matewan, where you've got a whole town, you've got armed forces against each other, you've got to build a tent camp. Got to go down in a coal mine is a lot different than something like Return of the Secaucus 7, where it's a bunch of people in a cabin.
Right. Yeah.
And it's quite honestly, it's one of the reasons.
And they've made quite a few movies that have taken place in a cabin. Over the decades, haven't they?
Yeah, and they're usually horror movies.
Yeah, right.
And it's one of the reasons that's often the entree for a new filmmaker is. There's always an audience for 12 people in a cabin, and one by one they're getting, skewered by
naked
something.
and then skewered.
Naked and skewered, usually,
in that order.
Yeah.
Even then, I interrupted you though.
No, and
you're talking about
so
May
one of
the sets.
The wherewithal, and it's one of the things that we've noticed about independent movies over the years is so many of the movies that we see now that young kids are making, right out of film school, or even if they don't go to film school, tend to be about people their age, contemporary movies, because that's what they can afford to do. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they really don't have the ambition to do anything else. One of the things that was rare with us is fairly early on, we said, well, the budgets may still be low, but we're going to try to be a little more ambitious and tell bigger stories. And some of them are even going to be, period stories. And we're going to have to, that's going to eat up a lot of the budget.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to be really efficient in doing them.
I live in a bubble. I grew up in New York City, but those movies also, these socially conscious movies like Mate One and 8 Men Out, even, and et cetera, and were made during this momentum that was going on with the new wave of independent filmmakers. That's when Hal Hartley and Tarantino and
Tarantino's
Spike
a little
Lee.
later.
A little bit later, yes.
Spike is only a couple of years after.
Right, Jim
I
Jarmusch
started.
was already in the
He was
in the
around the
mid-80s,
same time as I was.
80,
yeah.
a little, maybe slightly afterward, right? Like a few years. You started, like you said, 78, 79 with the, and then by 83, 84, they were starting to. All of a sudden, you start to see Jim Jarmusch, Hal Hartley, Spike Lee.
Robert Young had been around before me.
Susan
He's
Seidelman.
Still kind of making movies.
Who?
Robert Young. Robert Young made Alambrista, I think, was his first feature. He took director's credit on it. He was one of the guys who made Nothing But a Man. He's worked with Edward James Olmos a bunch of times, who I just work with. He's been making movies all along, and he's maybe 10, 15 years older than me.
Oh, yeah.
So there are those people who preceded me,
Yes.
Melvin Van Peebles,
Sure, of course.
Who,
Right.
I saw his movies
Even
when I was a teenager.
Robert Downey Sr.
Robert Downey Sr., who was making these strange avant-garde kind of funny things.
Underground cinema, they call it. Yeah.
Renting the equipment on a Friday so we'd get an extra day out of the rental because they didn't charge him for Sunday and that kind of stuff. And John Cassavetes, who was kind of the person who, although my movies don't resemble his in other ways, his existence was something that made me feel like, oh, maybe this is possible. Here's a guy who has a parallel career as an actor that helps finance this career as a director, and he's somebody who's an insider but an outsider. Obviously the big studios aren't distributing his movies.
I was going to make some dumb analogy, but like there's some punk ethic to some of that, and then you seemed to, with the Secaucus 7 and Babies, you're coming from a singer-songwriter almost. Approach.
Well, for one thing, is I was not a downtown New York filmmaker,
right?
I was out in Jersey. I was in Hoboken, where we still have our office.
You do, right? You're still operating out of.
And there was that there was a lot of energy, the kind of Talking Heads era. There were also a lot of filmmakers, and some of them are still around, and some of them don't make movies anymore. But there was that aesthetic. That came out. When I started, there were only about 3 film schools, and you could really tell an NYU film from a USC or a UCLA film. They were very, very just kind of traffic noise for one thing. The NYU film just lousy with traffic noise, and they were had a little more hard documentary edge to them, even if they were fictional films. And the USC and UCLA
like
films
early
were,
Scorsese.
A little more like, okay, in a couple of years these guys will be making Hollywood movies. I don't think that dichotomy is still there necessarily, and there are about 300 more film schools.
Yeah, well, even this podcast, as many shows as I've done in New York, there's a lot of traffic noise.
Yeah,
it's the soundtrack,
Yeah. You can put some traffic noise in.
Yeah. Well, we're
pretend that we're in New York.
We should mention we're in, even though you were kind of talking about why you were here. Here is Austin. And this is the day before South by Southwest is beginning, and I was going to meet with you in is it your office in Hoboken proper, or is it Secaucus?
It's in Hoboken.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it just timed out that this was this worked out real well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Is Karen Kasama was my assistant for a while, and then she made Girl Fight, which was best movie at the Sundance Film Festival several years back, and she's made a couple mainstream Hollywood movies, and now she has a movie that's premiering midnight tonight called The Invitation. That's kind of a psychological, sociological horror movie.
Right.
And so she's somebody who's in that quandary of probably not able to keep making independent films every time out. But after a couple studio movies, very relieved to make one outside of the mainstream and have a lot more control over it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, Steven Soderbergh is somebody who, would make three for them and one for him. And, that kind of thing. And every once in a while, there'd be that nice situation where he'd get studio financing for something he really wanted to do as well. But that ability to just keep making independent films, that's really there's really not a career there anymore unless you're awfully lucky or were born very independently wealthy.
Yeah,
which I wasn't.
But what I'm seeing now is this route, which is a lot of these young independent filmmakers getting a buzz from their first feature out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that doesn't take its toll. It may take several years. It can mean a lot of hardships. Yeah. But there's a buzz. They, getting the film out there, and then they get some HBO type of opportunity.
And that is the tip of the pyramid.
Yeah. But now that everybody's creating original content, there's more space.
The Sundance Film Festival gets probably about 2,000 feature films every year, mostly from first and second time directors. And next year there'll be another 2,000.
Sure.
So
at least
in the last 10 years, we're talking about 20,000, films.
Right. Which is kind of contributing to
will never get seen beyond that. We'll never get a distribution. So that's a great plan to have is, I'm going to do a crowdfunder and I'm going to make a feature by hook or crook, or even a short by hook or crook, and it's going to get enough buzz that I'm going to get a paying job, and that's going to lead to my career. And it does happen to some people. This is why people still go to casinos and horse races, is
right.
And play the lottery.
Yeah.
If nobody ever won the lottery, of course, in some countries, the lottery is fixed. At least the film business is not fixed. There are people who really just stumbled in and they made something really cool, and it got attention, and then they were able to build that into a career.
But there was did you even have a concept when you were well, I guess you must have, because you, like you said, you were already writing, making a living screenwriting. I
had a concept
and you
of screenwriting as a job. I did not have a concept of
filmmaking.
Filmmaking is going to be something I felt like, I'd like to make, I'd like to sometimes write an original script and say to Hollywood, okay, this is fairly low budget. I'd like to direct this one. Mm-hmm. And I knew that just on the strength of the writing, that was unlikely to happen. Mm-hmm. So I didn't just have the model of people like John Huston and those people. I had the model of people like Stanley Kubrick, whose first two movies were self-financed independent movies. Mm-hmm. There were other people who came in that way, or John Cassavetes or whatever, where you had something to show them. And here's a director, here's a movie that I've already directed, or here's two movies I've already directed. They didn't seem very much because they were made in a low budget, but here you can see I've worked with actors and moved the camera around, and then here's the screenplay, so give me the job. It was, kind of, Secaucus 7 was conceived as a calling card. I had no idea if we were going to get public screenings.
Right.
I thought it might play at on PBS or
festivals
or something like that. And then it just happened that we got distribution. Mm-hmm. But we were done with it in '79. It didn't come out until '80. It took a long time for it to actually find a distributor and for them to get a campaign together. And then it was very regional. They didn't open nationwide. They bicycled. I think we made maybe eventually 30 prints of the movie, and they just would go from one region to the other, and they do very local advertising. This is obviously before the web. Where where for very little money you can at least announce to the world, there's this movie that's made.
Sorry.
In fact,
it was like 15 years before
touch this button and you can have this movie on your computer.
Right. Right. There is something called Vimeo On Demand, or VHX. Yeah. There's a couple of companies that are now allow, like if you want to buy the movie right off somebody's website, or right off your website, you can put it your movie.
And the ideal thing about that is that you're cutting out all the middlemen.
Sure.
The problem is that people are so used to getting things for free that they're not going to pay very much for anything.
Well, also it's just also a matter of that's part of it, of course, but the other part is I mean, it's of an obscure film. You don't have to really worry about it being available illegally so much, but you do have to have a following for that model to work. Like Louis C.K. can put his stand-up concert on it, and doesn't need any distribution. He's
but
his
people
own
know who he is now.
Well, he's millions of people following him, and so he's been doing it for like 20 years. So
exactly. He's built up that audience,
so he can do very well and cut everybody out. But most of us don't have that. That network. The one other thing I just had a personal, curiosity and interest. Your casting has always been so great, and I know you don't do that alone. But I mean, not only does it appear that a lot of great actors have gotten their starts in your films. Joe Morton seems like, I don't know how long he'd been around before Brother from Another Planet.
I think he'd done one or two little parts in movies before. He mostly was a theater actor.
Yeah, that's what I was
mostly a Shakespearean actor when I know of him.
Oh, yeah.
So it was funny to cast him in a part where he didn't speak.
Like working for Joe Papp or somebody, or
he was in a Eastern Shakespeare company, actually.
Okay.
And he'd been in a nice movie called Above the Line or something like that, about the real paper in Boston. He had a little part in that, and he'd been in the road company of Hair. So he was, he's a very talented guy, but he had no movie profile. Chris Cooper, his first job on screen was Mate Juan. Matthew Modine's first movie and Robert Downey's first movie that wasn't for his father was Baby It's You.
I didn't know that.
It's that nice thing that you run into these actors and
Matthew McConaughey very early on.
And Matthew McConaughey, that was his second movie. He'd been in Rick Linklater's Dazed and Confused here when we cast him, and hadn't been in anything else.
But if you haven't seen Lone Star,
it was a really nice performance.
It's a great movie. I saw that with my dad.
Really?
I think it's the last movie we saw together.
Oh, really?
He's still around. It's just, it just happens to be the last movie we went into a movie theater and watched. I think I had already. Yeah, it was just we both loved it so much.
Yeah, but one of the things is that I had been an actor, and when I audition people, and if you can get them to come in, whether they're known or not that known or need the job or don't really need the job, if you can get them to come in, I would always act with them. I would be the other person shooting them lines. And it's a way to see not really if they can take direction, but if they've only got one thing they can do. So, good actors, if you throw it, this direction, they'll go in that direction. If you throw it in another direction, they'll go in that direction. And you can do that. You read the part 2 or 3 times, the little audition piece 2 or 3 times, and I would change what I was doing. And sometimes I would ask them to do something differently as a director, but sometimes I'd just do it as an actor, and I'd say, "Are they listening at all, or am I getting the same exact thing time after time?" And then you might still cast the person, but that's all you're ever going to get out of them.
Right.
There's not going to be no good surprises. And so and I've worked with good casting people, and their job is to get those people to come in, and to know which people to ask to come in. So you don't see 5,000 people, you only see 500 people.
Right.
And sometimes we've seen 500 people, for a movie with a big cast. I think for Mate Juan, Chris Cooper had the misfortune of being the first person who came in to read for it. And we didn't know who he was, boy, that guy was good.
Yeah.
And then, then another 30 people came in to read for the lead. Some of them very well-known actors, even then, came in to read for it. And we were leaning toward him, and then the money for the movie fell apart, and a year and a half went by. A woman we had cast in an important role was killed in a car accident.
Who was that?
The kids we were... Susan Kingsley was a wonderful actress. She really did very little in film. She was one of the big actors in the theater of Louisville, the Actors Theater. the kids that we had been reading were too old for the part,
right?
Right. And so once again, we started the casting process when we got the money back together. And once again, Chris Cooper was the first guy who came in, and he had that disadvantage. And at the end of the week, I had to look to everybody else and say, I think it was that first guy.
Yeah.
And I really kind of stood up and paid attention when he did the speech, and that was that. So you have to trust your instincts.
Yeah. And
one of the nice things that makes me keep wanting to make movies independently is I got to cast a movie that cost $3 million, which was not nothing in its day, $3.5 million, and I got to cast an unknown in the lead. If you're working for the studios, that's not going to happen.
No.
Occasionally in TV now they say, well, it's an experienced actor, it's not an unknown, but it's not a star. The Sopranos, none of those people were stars when they started that, but they were known actors.
Right.
I'd never been on film before to be the lead. You just don't get that power if you're working for a big corporation. Right. They can't take those kind of chances. They can't justify those kind of chances to their investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So some of the reasons that the casting is really good, and I love the people I've worked with, is I've been able to just cast the best person for the part, who says yes and is willing to work for scale.
And then you also discovered Studs Terkel. That was he.
Exactly. Yeah, Studs. He discovered us. I had done his radio show a couple times.
Oh, is that what it was? And
when I was casting for Hugh Fullerton and Ring Lardner, who I played in it, had kind of known each other as fellow sports writers and Chicago guys, and they always said, well, Hugh Fullerton, a little cigar stub of a man, was very garrulous, and Ring Lardner, who was kind of very shy and had a dry sense of humor, and kind of looked like an undertaker.
The writer.
Yeah,
Ring Lardner. Okay.
And so I figured, wow, who do I know who's a little cigar stub of a guy who's very garrulous, who's a Chicago guy, and it was Studs. Well. And Studs he hadn't really, I think he'd been in like one or two films in very small parts, but he had been a radio actor.
Oh, yeah,
and he used to play kind of, Edward G. Robinson kind of guys, in gangbusters kind of radio shows.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I didn't know that. You just had so many great casts, and you had, of course, Edie Falco, and also in Silver City, wasn't no, I'm sorry, Sunshine State.
She was in Sunshine State.
Sunshine State, yeah. I don't know. I'm always a little bit hesitant. In fact, I never ask about a bad incident or something, but I don't know if you... And we don't have to talk about it, but I was really moved and saddened by Elizabeth Pena's passing. And,
who was just great to work with and fun.
Yeah.
I met Liz Pena. I wrote one TV show that was on for 2 seasons when Brandon Tartikoff was running a network called Shannon's Deal. And Jamie Sheridan was the lead. Liz was the female lead. Jenny Lewis, who was later the lead singer in Reno Sweeney, was the kid. Miguel Ferrer was in it. Richard Edson was in it. Great cast. And it was about a guy who'd kind of been hit the bottom. He was a gambleaholic and had kind of blown his marriage and his career and everything, and had just come back trying not to gamble anymore, owing $500,000 to the mob, and trying to make it as just a lawyer for whoever needed a lawyer. But he realized that most of his clients were going to get killed if they went into court up against the big powerful people who were suing them, or they were suing them, or they were in trouble with. So he used poker logic to bluff the other side into what was best for his client. And it lasted 2 years as a fill-in show, so they only made about 13 episodes to it. And Liz was she had been in that show. I think she had been in El Super and maybe one other movie that I'd seen, but she'd done a lot of theater at that time. So I recommended her, and for once they actually listened to the writer and cast her. But she was great to work with.
Did she do a lot of TV then? Because I remember seeing her for a lot, and I know she didn't do that many films.
She never did that. She was actually, there was a moment when they I forget the name of it. There was a show that she was on that was going to be like the reverse of I Love Lucy, where she was going to be the wacky Hispanic and her husband was going to be the straight white guy or something like that.
Yeah.
She did that before. We did Shannon's Deal. She did a lot of movies. She did a lot of really interesting character parts. Right. But she had also done a lot of theater. Was never in West Side Story. She was very clear about that.
She was very proud that she did the go-to Latina role.
But she played Italians and others. She was a Cuban American, but had played a lot of different things. Really fun to work with. Really, really great person to work with. And we were lucky enough that she was free, when we made Mate One, because
she was in Mate One too.
No, I'm sorry, Lone Star.
Yeah, Lone Star.
You have these ideas of who you want to ask, and very often they're not free, they're not interested, they can't afford to work for that little money. They just built a new house and they have to make a lot of money. They just had a baby.
Sure. They're living a certain now
and quite honestly
lifestyle. Yeah.
Even up to this day, you can't be sure their agent told them that you made the offer.
Yeah, they're looking for their piece, and so they're not going to get it if they're undervaluing.
The agent is afraid they'll say yes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then they're
and then
working
they won't
for
get
scale.
Right. Then there goes their bit, more or less, So, but that does also bring up this other thing, which I did actually think to ask you, which is, and I've not referred to any of my notes, but was you do make a concerted effort to make films dealing with broader ethnic themes. I mean, starting again from Lone Star, of course, and then especially in the last few movies, I noticed with Amigo, and now Go for Sisters with Yolanda.
Yeah, what's interesting is first of all, it's just this is the world I lived in. And it was always a little strange to me that what I was seeing on the screen when I was seeing American movies was so different than the world I lived in, and that there were just people missing.
Right.
And
that seems obvious to you.
Yeah,
but most people aren't. Not that they're consciously trying to make other homogenous movies, but they're not.
Some people live in Chinatown, and they don't see that many white people. It's some people, live in a place where the ethnic group are Danish people.
Those are people that eat Danish? I never heard.
No, it's Solvang, California, down below Santa Barbara.
Was there really a Danish community?
There was a Danish community.
Like an enclave?
People would tell Danish jokes and stuff like that. What is this with the Danish jokes? So some of it is based on what your experience of the world is, and then some is what kind of movie can you get made. So it was a big deal to have a black lead in a movie. At one point it was a very unusual thing. There were, we're surrounded by posters here for, there was a whole period when there were movies that were made and only black people saw them. Louis Jordan was in movies. They had their own dramas and comedy movies and stuff like that, but they certainly weren't coming through Hollywood.
There's also a big period, and I can't remember what spurred it, but there was a big period where Hollywood, I think it was around the time of World War II, though, and it was probably as a result of something about World War II and shooting in European themes or whatnot, but they intentionally went to South America and they made tons of films, and there were all of a sudden Latin American stars in the system.
Well,
because
they were financing those movies and just because they wanted the thing, but they wouldn't play up here.
Well, these were like Carmen Miranda and people like all of a sudden were big stars here because
there was a little bit of an effort
during
the war of the good neighbor policy, where Disney made a couple, three caballeros or three caballeros as they call them, where Donald Duck was hanging out with, Jose Carioca and the Mexican parrot. I forgot the Mexican, Pedro, whatever his name was, and it was all about us being good friends.
I see.
But we had to be birds, or something like that to work it out. Orson Welles spent a couple of years down there, making this Latin American thing that the State Department asked him to do. Yeah. And then it kind of fell apart at the end.
Like all things Welles.
That things do, kind of fall apart.
Speaking of one of the independent filmmakers we left out.
Yeah.
So he was certainly making independent
films.
Trying to, yeah.
But, for me, it really was, okay, why am I not seeing this stuff up on the screen? And what an opportunity, my last movie, Go for Sisters, quite honestly, I was writing the movie and, I try not to think of who's going to play it. And because I might not be able to get them, I want to finish the script first. But about halfway through, I just realized I know who should be in this. they happened to be black. So I had worked with Lisa Gay Hamilton before. And then I had met Yolanda Ross when she came to audition for the part in Honey Ripper that Lisa Gay played.
Oh, right.
And I just said, I got to work with this person. She's just really, really incredibly talented. And then Edward James Olmos is somebody I'd met at film festivals and I'd always wanted to work with.
Oh, you hadn't worked with them yet?
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
And so the cast came together, and I said, okay, I think I've got 2 African-American women and a Chicano guy. I'm going to have to change the script to, in small ways, to reflect that.
Okay.
But it's still, the human things it's about could have been an all-white cast.
Well, it
just didn't happen to be.
I think it sounds like almost accidental the way you describe it, but it seems to me
there are other stories. It's kind of like, just because a movie has Denzel Washington or Will Smith in it doesn't mean, it's a movie about race or
social context. There.
Exactly.
It's just a big Hollywood star.
But there are movies where the story does have to do with racism, and it can be, Indian people or, Polish people or whatever, immigrants, Jews, whatever. And that's part of the story. And then you really have to pay attention to those things. Although the other thing that I do is, when I make any movie, I say, well, I'm not going to avoid anything that's there. So as a screenwriter in Hollywood, often they say, oh, we're getting a little too much into a controversial subject here. Yeah. So let's not bring up the shadow of abortion. For years and years and years, the fact that an abortion was an option for people did not appear on an American soap opera. That was just not part of the drama. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to get into it. Mm-hmm. So even though it was very much a part of the, our national debate and people's lives and something that you could consider as a woman, it was not. You're not going to see anything about it on a soap opera.
Yeah.
I haven't kept up with them, and they're kind of disappearing. I don't know if they're dealing with them now, but it may still be.
Evil Twins and Amnesia is fine.
Yeah,
apparently,
exactly.
But don't.
Aliens from outer space can come, but probably not abortion. And
well,
the same thing
but that's
race.
typical.
Yeah. So our movie City of Hope, it really is about cities, but you can't in America avoid the fact that most cities, have been kind of the story of ethnic groups and immigration and assimilation. And that many of our cities, okay, now it's the turn for the black people and the Hispanic people to run the city, now that there's nothing left to fight over. The money's all gone. So, guys, you can have Detroit.
Yeah.
You can have Cleveland.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought of a great Danish joke, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Hans Christian Andersen walks into a bar. So anything coming up, by the way? Or do you have something?
This is kind of the life of independent filmmaker and screenwriter for hire. There are dozens of things that might come up. I have at least 4 screenplays written I'd love to make. Mm. I have written several things for other people that might get financed and made. Let's see, they're about to, in April, they're going to shoot the pilot of a TV show that I've written called Dr. Dell that will star John Hawkes. He's a terrific actor, so
he seems to be the go-to guy now. Did you see that one where we played about the jazz musician?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, yeah. It's
good actor, and he's a guy who's he's been around. He used to live here in Austin and do theater and tend bar and
working
do construction
actor type,
and
right?
and he's gotten himself to the point where he can make a living as an actor and doesn't have to do anything else, which is great.
And do the thing now, one project for them, one for me.
Well, whatever. Choice. I don't even know if he does one for them. He's really been in a lot of good stuff lately.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing in that it's an independently made pilot. So they'll make the pilot and then try to sell it. And that may be the future, who knows? But rather than have the thing killed in the cradle with overdevelopment and, no, let's make it this, let's make it that, they decided, let's make the pilot that we want to make. And so if that happens, I'll probably maybe write some more episodes and help them, figure out the story and stuff like that. Let's see.
It's about a doctor.
No, it's actually about a pharmacist.
Oh, very good.
In a town in the Southwest that's so small. that the same guy, the nearest hospital is, 2 hours away. He functions kind of as a doctor,
Gotcha.
Marriage counselor.
I saw an independent film like this.
I'm sure there's something like that. There's so many films. This is actually based on a good article in the New Yorker that was out. So it's based on a real situation.
Yeah.
Then let's see. I've written the American version of a Johnny Toe movie about surveillance cops.
Mm-hmm.
I've written short miniseries about a guy named Bass Reeves, who was a black deputy marshal in the Indian Territory during the kind of True Grit years, an actual guy that might or might not get made by the cable outlet. I've written something about the Texas Two, who were a couple guys from Austin who got arrested at I think it was the 2008 convention in Minneapolis, the Democratic convention, for making Molotov cocktails but not using them.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a kind of, okay, was this entrapment or not?
Yeah, well, were they tried as domestic terrorists?
Yeah.
And
they did
there's a documentary about that.
And they're out. Yeah, it's based on the documentary.
Is it If a Tree
Better
Falls?
This World.
Oh, Better This World. Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
So I've adapted that to a feature. People are trying to raise the money for that.
Right.
I've adapted a book called American Prophet about Edgar Casey that John Cusack is involved in. They're looking for money for that. I've written a screenplay.
Like it could come about.
About the Rosenbergs. We've been trying to raise money for years.
Anyway.
I've written a movie that's set during the Tasmanian penal colony in 1830. I'd like to make. I've written a movie, the one that we're kind of most pursuing, raising money right now, about the Carlisle Indian School. In Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
It's where eventually the most famous person who ever went there was Jim Thorpe.
Okay.
But the story I want to tell is about 12 years before he got there in 1890. It was an idea by this military guy named Pratt. Captain Pratt was somebody who had been the officer of black troops, but also had Indian scouts. And he came away from it saying, well, these guys are just as smart as we are. What's holding them back? Well, what's holding the blacks back is, racism and, slavery. And we got rid of the slavery part at least. And now let's work on the racism. But with the Indians, it's their culture. Mm-hmm. So it's this interesting thing that he was probably more than a liberal in his time. He was probably a progressive in his time. But his idea was, let's take Indian kids away from the reservations where they're kind of dying of disease and not doing very well all over the country, boys and girls, away from their parents, away from their culture, and make them white.
Yeah, that.
So it's about very, very conscious. Yeah. Racial, kind of cultural genocide, right. At the same time that the people who are doing it have nothing but good intentions.
Yeah, so benign racism is, I think, what they call that.
At the time,
there
was one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time, and then
what the
hangover from it was very bad. And good things came out of it as well as awful things. So, I always say it was kind of the Alcatraz and the Harvard of Native Americans, because it's where the Pan-Indian movement started. People did graduate from there and become lawyers. Among them were the lawyers who got Indians U.S. citizenship. They weren't U.S. citizens until the 20s.
Right.
So if you ran away from school at the Carlisle Indian School, you were a fugitive from federal justice. It was that you were a ward of the state, and you didn't go anywhere without the federal government saying you could go there. You didn't have the rights of American citizen.
It's another probably very obscure, unknown story. They don't teach that in the history books.
Known more among Native Americans who have relatives who went there and told them stories than among white people. But it's something that was a huge deal at the time.
Yeah.
And then they got famous, in the early 10s when Jim Thorpe was playing there, because modern football as we know it was partly invented there by Pop Warner, who was their coach, and who had this football team of guys who were 10 to 20 pounds lighter than everybody they faced on the line. And he said, well, what are we going to do to win? I'm going to have to come up with some new plays and a much more mobile kind of, offense. And then they got a couple of these incredible athletes like Jim Thorpe. And they ended up being the best team in America for several years.
Wow.
And beating the guys who were the unbeatable powers like Army and Harvard and Yale. And, back when, Ivy League football was pretty much it.
Yeah. The Harvard-Yale game was the big game. You sort of have this sort of Howard Zinn approach to finding those unsung heroes throughout and stories that are
what's interesting?
Sort of the underclasses of.
I remember reading Vine Deloria Jr. Had this book called "Buried My Heart at Wounded Knee."
Sure.
And each chapter is kind of a different confrontation between the European, born white people moving west and a different Indian nation. And as I read the chapters, I said, I've seen this movie. That was Charles Bronson, or that was Burt Lancaster, or, that's some Italian guy playing this Indian.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is a better story. Why didn't they use this story?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of my feeling when I read history is, why didn't they use this story? This is a much more.
This is compelling and cinematic, and it's true.
Yeah, it's usually, I think, though, the reason they didn't is that the history itself is more complex. And that one of the things that movies do really well is black hats and white hats. Is polarize things.
Right.
How do we make the bad guy so bad that the audience cheers when rabid chipmunks eat him bloodily in the last reel? How do we make it so clear who the good guys and bad guys are that even people who don't speak the language that the movie is spoken in understand what's going on. And, so when you go into complexity, you are limiting your audience.
It doesn't give people a sense of comfort. World War II gave us hundreds of movies that comforted audiences because we knew who the bad guys were, and they often lost the battle at the end, and that was a very comforting
and it took another 10 years for there to start to be those movies that were a little more complex.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there is always, with anybody who's making entertainment for the public, there's always this thing of who is my core audience? I know they're going to get this movie and love this movie. And then how many other people can we invite in? And as you're writing, you have to be very, very aware of that. Is there a way in? Is there enough context here? So our movie Mate one of the reasons I picked that particular incident in labor history is it's a Western. It ends up with a showdown, on the main street at high noon, and so there was something, familiar about the form of it to a general audience, even though this is not a country that really likes to think that it has a working class or is that, has a long, long history of movies about the labor movement. So when whenever I'm writing movies and planning to make a movie, I also have to think about
is there enough meat on the bone?
Yeah, that genre thing. Brother from Another Planet, is really a movie about assimilation. It's an immigrant movie,
right?
But it's comes in the package of a science fiction movie.
Yeah, sitting with my son, and I'm going to We'll wind down now, but sitting with my son recently and watching the original Planet of the Apes, I was reminded that was a civil rights story, thinly disguised.
What if we reverse things?
Yeah.
And the humans were the ones who, had to stand up and say, I'm a man,
right.
And a woman, or ain't I a human, or whatever,
But there were also class systems to the different.
And I think it's also interesting, not so much in the sequels that were made shortly after that one, what they've done with the modern ones, which is very interesting and only possible now that you have the CGI and the other things to make those creatures look more like actors with rubber masks on.
Right.
They're not human, but they really are people with eyes and minds and they look like they're really doing that stuff, and that opened it up for the writers and creators of the couple new Planet of the Apes to do something really interesting with them.
If anybody offered you one of those, that would be that might.
It was. I always wanted to write a Conan, the Barbarian. Those just seemed like so much fun.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because I heard that one of the greatest audio commentary sessions, is on that Conan DVD between Arnold Schwarzenegger and
John Milius.
John Milius. That apparently it is so entertaining. Somebody in another segment told me that they watched that because Schwarzenegger kind of owes his career to Milius in that regard because it really put Schwarzenegger on the map. I think you know me.
Yeah. And there's this interesting phenomenon of Game of Thrones, which is somebody kind of watched all the great kind of Hollywood and European period movies and said, let's just take all the history out and just do all the fun stuff. And so we'll make up a land, but you'll have 6 different eras and technologies coexisting at the same time.
Right.
And then we won't really give the countries names or anything like that. So we don't have to worry about Greek mythology, even though we can steal a lot of stuff from Greek mythology or Roman mythology or Norse mythology or King Arthur's legend or this or that, the other thing, And it's to me, it's that it's almost like repurposing. It's like recycling, and movies have always done that. They've always kind of just used history or the movies that came previously as elements in something new. The way hip hop guys sample, from guys who were recording before they were born.
Mm-hmm. It's great, a great comparison. Well, thank you, and. I think we
covered a lot.
Covered a lot. I appreciate all the time you've given me. I didn't, 'cause I didn't know what to expect, but I appreciate it tremendously. And I guess we'll have more opportunities. We'll have to talk about other topics though, because I think we covered your film career pretty well. Have you done like many of these kind of conversations where you've talked
when I have a movie come out, I usually do between 200 and 300 interviews, and probably 1 out of every 10 or 15 of those is like a career
more of a
interview.
Retrospective interview because
they have a little more time.
I kind of was hoping part of the fix I find myself in so often is that when I'm talking to somebody like yourself and we do a conversation on a press day for one of your films, let's say in the last case was Gopher Sisters, it's a little frustrating for me because I'm interested in the film, in that film, but I'm interested also in the larger picture too. Yeah. And I think the people that listen to what I do are interested in listening to that. And so,
but the job of I remember seeing who was such a Hollywood guy, Peter Lawford, on the Johnny Carson show one time. And obviously the publicist said, say the name of the movie as many times as you can. And he was such an old pro and, kind of born in that world. The name of the movie was Buonasera, Mrs. Campbell. And he must have said it 50 times.
Yeah. And it does trip
when we were making Buonasera, Mrs. Campbell, every sentence had it in it.
I'm often kind of caught in between the publicists and doing their bidding.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's part of what I do.
Well, thank you.
So yeah. Thank you so much.